Good morning. We got some birds here. We're going to continue with the answer sheet for the questions that we have written somewhere. Only 70 of them. So I'm going to show you what we're trying to do and see if that helps make it easier. So here is what the answer sheet looks like. It's going to want you to do, let's see, have columns. You know, and to be totally honest here, I can't tell if that's clear or not. So we're going to hope. So what I noticed is it seems like in that first category, they want you to have answer 1, 8, 15, 22, 29, 36, 43, 50, 57, and 64 as to whether you have A or B. So, like I said, we're going to see what we can do. So now I'm going to show you their example of how they filled it all in to get their answer. And then I'm going to read some to soothe us from having to figure this out. So here we go. Here's the next part. This is their example one that they had. Now, because this is on video, you can pause anything and be able to see what the heck is going on. And then this is what we're going to end up with down here. So now I'm gonna do this other one more time because I can see how much clearer it is now. So the answer sheet looks something like this. And you're trying to figure it out. There's our directions. And then the last part over here is this seems to be the goal. We're going to end up with some of these down here and then these up here. Now, I've seen these forever, but I really did not know what they mean. What I am saying is that all this information is a little bit more, so I'm going to read this to, again, soothe us from having to look at that chart. So, let's see. The number 3 there is, now you have 4 pairs of numbers. Circle the letter below the larger number of each pair. See the answer sheet below for your illustration. If the 2 numbers of any pair are equal, then circle neither, but put a large X below them and circle it. Now here at the bottom, you have now identified your type. It should be one of the following. If you have an X in your type, yours is a mixed type. An X can show up in any of the 4 pairs, E or I, S or N, T or F, and J or P. Hence, there are 32 mixed types besides the 16 listed above. Having identified type, the task now is to read the type description and to decide how well or how poorly the description fits. You will find a description or portrait of your type on the page indicated in the table of contents. If you have an X in your type, yours is a combination of 2 types. If, for example, the E and I scores are equal, and the type is, say, XSFJ, then you would read both the ESFJ and the ISFJ portraits and decide for yourself which parts of each description are applicable. One may also profit from reading the portrait of one's opposite to see how things are on the other side. How one proceeds after reading one's own type portrait depends largely upon temperament. Some of the types will read several other portraits before returning to the text, while others will return immediately to the text. Some may never read all 16 of the type descriptions. As will be shown, the typology is useful if an observer can distinguish between 4 types of temperament. It is not at all necessary to make these finer distinctions. However, such differences can become useful after long study. All the birds have decided to hang out again. I hope it's clear. Okay, the 4 pairs of preferences. Thank you for staying with me this far. Oh, the boat. Having read a description of your type and perhaps a few other type descriptions, you may well wonder what the temperament sorter or type indicator was based on. What did Jung mean by extraversion? E. Introversion? I. Sensation? S. Intuition? N. Thinking? T. Feeling? F. Perceiving? P. And judging? J. First, it should be noted that Jung did not say that a person is either one or the other of these 4 pairs. Rather, one can be extroverted in some degree, as well as introverted in some degree, thinking in some degree and feeling in some degree, and so on. Second, Jung did not say that one doesn't change in the extent of preference for one or another of the 4 differences. As time passes, one preference may strengthen or weaken. Of course, it is not at all clear what Jung meant by preference, other than that for one reason or another, a person chooses one way of doing or being over another. Third, the question of whether these preferences are inborn or developed fortuitously in infancy, the youth remains unsettled. Jung apparently believed the former, though his pronouncements are not very clear on this point. Whether inborn or chosen later, the functions, according to Jung, develop and become stronger through use. If, for example, a person uses his intuition, the intuition becomes more powerful. If a person uses his feelings, they become stronger. Conversely, if one doesn't use one's thinking or judging, or whatever these functions, do not develop and become, so to speak, rusty with disuse. This is an interesting hypothesis, perhaps worthy of research. At any rate, what is important about the Jungian typology are the descriptions of how people differ in their preferred actions, quite apart from Jung's accuracy or inaccuracy in choosing names for these preferences. The first part is extraversion versus introversion. The person who chooses people as a source of energy probably prefers extraversion, while the person who prefers solitude to recover energy may tend towards introversion. In temperament, shorthand, extroversion is abbreviated by the letter E and introversion by the letter I. And it has a little spot here that says sources of misunderstanding. Extroverts, with their need for sociability, appear to be energized or tuned up by people. Talking to people, playing with people, and working with people is what charges their batteries. Extroverts experience loneliness when they are not in contact with people. When an extreme extrovert leaves a party at 2 o'clock in the morning, he may well be ready to go to another one. His batteries are almost overcharged, having received so much energy from the interaction. While the extrovert is sociable, the introvert is territorial. That is, he desires space, private places in the mind, and private environmental places. Introverts seem to draw their energies from a different source than do extroverts. Pursuing solitary activities, working quietly alone, reading, meditating, participating in activities which involve few or no other people. These seem to charge the batteries of the introvert. Thus, if an extreme introvert goes to a party, after a reasonable period of time, say half an hour, he is ready to go home. For him, the party is over. He is no party pooper. Rather, he was pooped by the party. Introverts, too, are likely to experience a sense of loneliness when they are in a crowd. They are most alone when surrounded by people, especially strangers. When waiting in a crowded airport or trying to enjoy themselves at a noisy cocktail party, some introverts report experiencing a deep sense of isolation and disconnectedness. This is not to say that introverts do not like to be around people. Introverts enjoy interacting with others, but it drains their energy in a way not experienced by extroverts. Introverts need to find quiet places and solitary activities to recharge, while these activities exhaust the extrovert. If the latter goes to a library to do research, for example, he or she may have to exercise strong will power to prevent themselves, after 15 minutes or so, from taking a short brain break and striking up a conversation with the librarian. It is quite the opposite with the introvert, who can remain only so long in interaction with people before he depletes his reserves. The question always arises, does not an extrovert also have an introverted side? And does not an introvert also have an extroverted side? Yes, of course. But the preferred attitude, whether it be extroversion or introversion, will have the most potency, and the other will be the suppressed minority. The preferred attitude will be expressed in the conscious personality and will reflect the aim, will, and achievement of the conscious personality. The suppressed minority is only partly in consciousness and reflects what happens to one. This less favored side of a person's temperament is This less favored side of a person's temperament is less differentiated and is less energized and is apt to be more primitive and undeveloped. Jung even claims that if, through pressure on the part of the mother, the child is coerced into living out of his inferior side, the falsification of type results in the individual's becoming disturbed in later life. If a person prefers extraversion, his choice coincides with about 75% of the general population, from Bradway from 1964. Only about 25% reported introversion as their preference, according to Myers, also Bradway, 1964. Indeed, Western culture seems to sanction the outgoing, sociable, and gregarious temperament. The notion of anyone wanting or needing much solitude is viewed rather often as reflecting an unfriendly attitude. Solitary activities frequently are seen as ways to structure time until something better comes along, and this something better, by definition, involves interacting with people. As a consequence, introverts are often the ugly ducklings in a society where the majority enjoy sociability. There is the story about a mother heard to protest loudly and defensively, "My daughter is not an introvert. She is a lovely girl." Introverts have reported that they have gone through much of their lives believing that they ought to want more sociability, and because they do not, are indeed ugly ducklings who can never be swans. As a result, the introvert seldom provides adequately for his very legitimate desire for territoriality, for breathing room without experience a vague feeling of guilt. Cue words. The main word which differentiates an extrovert from an introvert is sociability, as opposed to territoriality. But the extrovert also finds breadth appealing, where the introvert finds the notion of depth more attractive. Other notions which give a cue to this preference are the idea of external as opposed to internal, the extensive as opposed to the intensive, interactive as opposed to concentration, multiplicity of relationships as opposed to limited relationships, expenditure of energy as opposed to conservation of energy, interest in external happenings as opposed to interest in internal reactions. All right, I'm going to stop there, and the next one goes into intuition versus sensation. So it is explaining the point of answering the questions, fussing with that chart, and I'm just going to stop because we're at 17 minutes, but I'm going to read some more so that we have, let's see what's next. Intuition versus sensation, and then we'll have thinking versus feeling, and then judging versus perceiving. So I'm going to do what I can to get these added on here so that I can get the information in my own head. I appreciate you listening and watching. The cormorants came in and moved over and went to hang out with all of their buddies, the pelicans. I don't know. I like to remember that birds of a feather flock together. So thank you again for listening and watching and being with me this morning. I appreciate you.